Now, finally, a glimpse of sense. The Equality and Human Rights Commission has today published guidance saying single-sex spaces can exclude certain trans access where it is fair and proportionate to do so. In the face of, frankly, often uncompromising demands to allow men who now identify as women to access ladies' toilets, changing rooms, prisons, hospital wards, refuges and sports, it is now enshrined by the UK rights watchdog that an iota of albeit wishy-washy common sense is not a bigoted atrocity after all. Do you know, I'm sick of hearing mainly men argue over who can and can't come into women's private spaces or compete in our sports, as if the latent risk to the safety of half the population is expendable at the altar of a small subset of individuals amidst what I consider a disturbing trend for gender dysphoria. But for all the women out there celebrating, I wouldn't hold your breath. The flimsy guidance is hardly going to stop the furious push to make a mockery of centuries of hard-won rights. But it's a start. Susan Smith joins us now. She's from For Women's Scotland, which works to protect and strengthen women's and children's rights. Now, Susan, slightly different picture in Scotland, because there was a big old ding-dong, wasn't there, between the watchdog and the Scottish government, who tried to radicalise trans rights to make it the easiest country in the world, frankly, to be able to transition.
Yes, and they wrote a letter to the Scottish Government recently about their proposals to expand the GRA and allow basically anyone to apply for a gender recognition certificate and change their legal sex. And the Scottish Government actually, and their funded organisations, joined in the general slating of the Equality Watchdog and its chair, which is quite shocking. I think the important thing is there's nothing new in this guidance. This is the law. This is where we're supposed to be, and this is what we've been saying and other organisations have been saying for a long time. The law allows people to exclude members of the opposite sex from single-sex spaces, and that should be a pretty common sense statement of fact. And what we need now in Scotland are root and branch questions about how the organisations and the government have strayed so far from the law.
Yeah, I mean, does this guidance give you any hope that we might be moving back in a sensible direction? Or do you think, well, it's a bit vague, isn't it? Where, you know, these words like when it's proportionate to do so and so on and so, it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't lay out exactly when it's right or when it's wrong to say that a trans person or someone who now identifies as a woman can't access a single sex space.
I think this is really because probably 12 years ago, when the Equality Act was drawn up, nobody really expected that they were going to be in a position where they were going to have to justify single-sex spaces or to argue what we mean when we talk about single-sex spaces. And this is just an indication of how far organisations like Stonewall have completed this institutional capture and managed to reframe the law and to reinterpret the law. And you see from the reaction of people to this new guidance, the people who are saying this is unlawful, it'll be subject to judicial review. And we had a case very recently in Scotland, which we won. We took the Scottish Government to court, and that was based really on the Equality Act. And it was because the Scottish Government had tried to introduce a measure for positive action to balance public boards 50-50 male-female representation, and they included in their definition of women anybody who self-identified as a woman. And we took it to judicial review and then to appeal, and we won. And the highest court in Scotland said that measures to include women, by definition, under the Equality Act, excluded biological males. But this is apparently now a shocking thing to say. And so one thing that came through in this guidance quite clearly was how organisations should be operating, and they should be working out where the need is. And we're now in a position in Scotland where we have rape crisis centres that are led by people who are biologically male. In England, the situation is somewhat more positive. There are plenty of independent organisations who've carried out surveys. And what the surveys found, surprise, surprise, was that women want to be in single-sex spaces in those very extreme or times when they're very vulnerable. They want that reassurance, and they want to know that if they ask for a female doctor or a female examiner or a female rape crisis counsellor, that's what they're going to get. And what this guidance does say is that's what organisations should be doing. So we think that's a good thing. And we think that the organisations in Scotland need to step up and start doing that. Otherwise, they might find themselves on the end of a discrimination suit at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And that's
Susan,
not the way to go
more.
about it.
Susan Smith, co-director for Women Scotland. Well, Stonewall is the organisation which campaigns for the rights of trans people and have issued this statement. It says, far from clarifying how the single-sex exemptions in the Equality Act should be used, I agree with that, the EHRC's latest non-statutory guidance is likely to create more confusion. It appears to go against the core presumption of the Act, which is that inclusion should be the starting point, and shifts the focus towards reasons trans people, and specifically trans women, can be excluded. Well, we don't have much time left, but give me your quick hit on what you think about this.
There's such a loud voice. This lobby is such a loud voice that are drowning out what women want. And I think that in the future, they'll change shops, they'll change all sorts of places, so there'll be private changing. But for now, single spaces for women is respectful, and we shouldn't have to explain why we want it.
We certainly shouldn't have to explain it to men. Anna May, thank you so much. Well, that's all I've got time for.